Hey, mythology fans, welcome back. In my last video, I talked about the trickster, and I had asked if any of my viewers knew any women tricksters, and a subscriber had a good idea for one, and it was in Arthurian legend, Morgan Le Fay. Morgan Le Fay was his half-sister. She was always troublesome to King Arthur. She did all kinds of nasty things to him and to his knights. She hated Queen Guinevere. She's usually seen as a villain and a sorceress, but in some ways she wasn't the major threat. The major threat turned out to be his bastard son, Mordred. And in the end, Morgan Le Fay actually reconciles with King Arthur, and she's the one that takes him to Avalon, the Isle of Apples, to heal his wounds. So she might qualify as an interesting kind of trickster. I kind of like it. As a matter of fact, what was really funny is I was actually wearing the same shirt in my last video. This is supposed to be Morgan Le Fay pictured as kind of a modern-day fortune teller with her crystal ball and the signs of the zodiac. I picked this up in Normandy many years ago. So thanks to my one of my subscribers for that idea. In today's video, I want to talk about underworlds. Of course, a lot of mythologies, a lot of ancient religions have notions of the underworld, the places you go, the place you go when you die. We get the notion of the underworld in Greek mythology. Of course, there's Hades, which is a place that Odysseus in the Odyssey has to enter in order to have a conversation with the prophet Tiresias. And it's kind of a gloomy place. Odysseus has to kill a bull and empty out its blood, and in the entrance to the underworld, and the shades come and they are attracted to the blood because the blood symbolizes life, and these the dead that live in Hades, it's not a happy existence. It's not really a place of punishment. It's not a place of happiness either. It's like the shades that are there are just sort of shambling around. They're sort of empty shells of what they once were. It's not really a happy place. You really don't want to go there, but there's no other place you can go unless you're an amazing hero and you enter Mount Olympus. The only one that did that was Heracles. When we get to later literature, in the Aeneid, in the work by Virgil, the underworld is broken into several places. There is a happy realm and a place of torture for those who went down there that were evil in life. You had the place where the people were tormented. They're seen as whipped by the Furies. These are the three goddesses of vengeance. It's a place called Tartarus. And Tartarus is spoken of in Greek mythology too. It's usually pictured as the deepest point in the earth, where I believe the Titans were chained. But in the Aeneid, it's a place of torture. And there's another realm known as the Elysian Fields, which is actually a happy place. It's a place where the virtuous go. And Aeneas, the hero of the Aeneid, meets his father Anchises, and Anchises explains to Aeneas there's a whole bunch of souls down there, and he shows them that these one day will be reincarnated as your great descendants of Rome, because it's believed that the Trojans were the ancestors of the Romans, and once they pass through the river Lethe, which runs through there, they'll forget their past memories, and they'll be reborn as certain important leaders of the Roman Empire, and there's two gates that you could leave the Elysian Fields with. One is the gate of ivory, and the other is the gate of horn. It's believed dreams exit the Elysian Fields. If a dream leaves through the gate of ivory, it's a false dream. So if you have this dream and it doesn't come true, then you know it was it left through the gate of ivory. It's if it's a dream that came true, then it's believed to have left the underworld through the gate of horn. So that's an interesting concept. In Sumerian and Babylonian mythology, namely Mesopotamian mythology, the place which is pretty much modern-day Iraq, there's a very interesting story about Gilgamesh and his little buddy Enkidu. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh and Enkidu are very close, but in other stories, Enkidu is sort of like a servant. Gilgamesh drops these two instruments into this hole in the earth, in somebody's house. But apparently it's not your regular hole, it's a hole that leads to the underworld. And Enkidu, who's his servant, says, "Oh, I'll go down and get it." And Gilgamesh warns him, you be very careful, don't attract attention to yourself, don't wear certain clothing, don't do certain things, because if they grab hold of you, you're not going to be able to escape. So, well, Enkidu doesn't listen, and he goes down there, and the goddess of the underworld is this frightening figure known as Ereshkigal. And Ereshkigal, she's seen as, even though she's queen of the underworld, there's an erotic thing about her. She's usually not pictured wearing much clothing, and it's believed she grabs hold of him. That's one interpretation. When I read the actual English translation, it says the earth grabbed him. The earth is just another name for the underworld. Gilgamesh is very upset that his servant hasn't come back yet. And he asks various gods for help, and none of them want to help him until he goes to the god Ea. And Ea manages to bring up the soul, not the whole body and the soul, but just the soul of Enkidu. And Gilgamesh says, "Wow, how was it like in the underworld?" And Enkidu says, "This is bad news down there. There's all kinds of corpses that are being eaten by vermin, and just like you see decay on Earth, you see decay in the underworld. I guess the souls undergo the same type of decaying process. It's kind of confusing, but that's what he says he sees. But there are some good things. For example, if you died and you left a lot of kids, you can live like a king down there, because your offspring, they remember you. And I don't know the rites that they had in ancient Mesopotamia, but I'm guessing they might have given prayers or offerings to the dead, so you're better provided for in the afterworlds. This whole idea of the afterlife and seeing horrible visions of people in various states of decay is something you see here and there, not only in the story from Mesopotamia, but in Japanese mythology. The first couple, Izanagi and Izanami, the first couple, the godly couple who came down to Earth and were the ancestors of the islands of Japan. Izanami dies, and her husband Izanagi goes in search of her in this cavern that leads to the underworld, and she says to him, "Don't come closer to me. I don't want you to see me in this condition." And he ignores that, and he keeps walking until he sees her. And sure enough, her body is in this state of decay, and it's really gross. And also in Mayan mythology, in the New World, the Maya were the people. They inhabited parts of Central America and Mexico, and they had a place. Their underworld had a name called Xibalba. Xibalba. That's the best I can do to pronounce it. And Xibalba is also described as some people sometimes describe it as places where the denizens who are there, the dead, look like there's supposedly various states of decay that they're in too. And Xibalba is a frightening place. There's different regions to it, and there's different houses, and there's the house of the knives, and the house of the jaguars, and the house of the bats, and all of these houses really harmful to anybody that goes and visits the underworld. But in the Popol Vuh, which is the sacred book of mythology and ancient religion that the Maya have, it's actually they speak of two heroes. There's two brothers that go down and challenge the lords of the underworld, and they're able to escape from these houses, these trials, and eventually they reach a ball court. Now, ball courts are very important in Mexican society. It was a game they really played, and it had a sacred significance to it. It was a tough little rubber ball, and there were two teams, and they had to pass it through this hoop, kind of like basketball, but the hoop is vertical, it's not horizontal. And this game was played apparently in the underworld as well. And the two brothers challenged the lords of the underworld, and they beat them, which is seen as a triumph over death, basically. So that's a glimpse into Xibalba. In Egypt, the underworld has a name. It's called the Duat. I'll have all these descriptions as well as books below. In Egypt, there's a place called the Duat, and the Duat is, again, this frightening realm. All these underworlds are pretty frightening places. Oh, they're sad places, apparently. The Duat is this place where it's also very dangerous. There's these places that, that supposedly there's lakes of fire, and there's these pits and walls of iron, and but eventually there is a place that you have to get to. What happens is that in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Book of the Dead is actually a guidebook to get you through these perils of the underworld and how to make it to the Hall of Osiris. Osiris is the god of the dead. And if you pass that major trial, then you could actually have a good existence in the underworld. Osiris is pictured as a mummy, because he's sort of like the prototypical mummy, because it's believed that in order to survive in the afterlife, you have to preserve, the Egyptians believe you have to preserve the body. Hence, people who were rich, people who were royalty, they had a lot of money, they were able to preserve the body very well. People who were poor, they did whatever they had to, because they believed they had to preserve the body in some way in order to gain life, in order for your soul to be alive in the underworld or the afterlife. And so he's sort of like the prototypical mummy, because he was the first to be mummified. He was killed by his evil brother Set, and he was mummified, given life in the underworld. What happens is that, you probably heard of this story, your heart, your heart it's a test of your virtue, and your heart is weighed against on a scale against a little figure known as Maya. She's the goddess of justice. And sometimes on the other scale, I mean, in one scale is your heart, usually sitting in a canopic jar, and on the other scale is a little crouching figure, which is believed to be Mayat. However, sometimes it's just her feather. So sometimes on the other scale there's a feather. And if you're truly a virtuous and honest person, your heart will be lighter than the feather, and you'll be presented to Osiris, and he will welcome you to happy afterlife, I think. If you were a liar, a deceiver, your heart will weigh heavier than the feather, and your soul will have like a second death. It will be eaten by this monster named Amut. Moving on, I just want to mention two other things. Of course, in Norse mythology, there's an underworld as well. There is actually, the dead, there's two places. There isn't simply an underworld, but there's an overworld. If you die either through sickness or old age, they call that a straw death, and you go to the underworld. And the underworld is called Nifleheim. It's also called Hell, which is where we get it's from the German. It's from the Germanic that we get the term hell from, and so the term is called hell. According to one writer, what's the difference between hell and Nifleheim? According to one writer, hell is sort of a location of Nifleheim. Nifleheim is bigger, and hell is a certain location where the dead go to. I'm not completely sure, but hell is hell itself is broken up into two parts, and it's if you were okay, you were an okay guy, you were treated nicely by the goddess of death. Her name was Hel also, or Hela. Kind of like in Greek mythology, Hades is the land of the dead, and Hades is also the god of the dead. In the same thing in Norse mythology, she goes by Hel or Hela, and the land is Hell. And she treats you well, but you're tormented if you were evil in life. Hell has an interesting, one of the roots of the tree, of the world tree, goes down there, and there's a dragon that sits there and gnaws on the root of this tree, Yggdrasil. However, it's a place you don't want to go to, and if you were a brave warrior and died in battle, you were taken up to live with the gods in a place called Valhalla, which is one of the halls of the heavens. The heavens is a place called Asgard, and there's many different halls. Every god has his hall, but the hall of the heroes is Valhalla, and it's believed you'll be up there, and you do a lot of feasting and fighting. It's a Viking's dream, and you do that. And it's very interesting, this whole idea of being associated. I want to get back to the idea of this whole idea of the body as still being associated with the soul. We talk about people looking like they're decaying in the underworlds when really it's a soul. There's an image there are old images, old paintings of Valkyries bringing up heroes, and because it's believed that if you died in battle, some Valkyrie, which is a beautiful type of demi-goddess, would bring you up to Valhalla. And usually images I see of that is the dead warrior slumped over her horse, and I'm like, well, it's the soul, right? Well, why is he slumped over the horse like he's dead? She's not bringing the dead body up to heaven. It's this notion of death being kind of really personified in a way. You're being taken up to heaven because you're dead, and it seems like there's always this tie between a soul and the body. And when I think of hell in the Christian sense, or heaven, a lot of people like to think, well, at least we're divorced from that concept of the body being associated with the soul. The soul has no dependence on the body. The body is buried, and the soul goes up to heaven or goes down to hell, depending on whether or not you were good or whatever religion you believed in. You had to believe in. But not so fast. There's also this notion of you having to have some sort of body to house your soul. For example, the New Testament talks about at the final judgment, your soul is reunited with your body for the final judgment, which is really interesting. I spoke to a Protestant deacon once about this, and he didn't know that. And I'm like, dude, you're a deacon. How could you not know that? It's in the New Testament. And, I think what happened is that over time, people have forgotten this part. When I grew up Catholic, I was told that, when you die, if you're good, you go to heaven. If you're bad, you go to hell. And there was no talk of your soul having to be incorporated into some sort of body. But in some ways, it is. There's talk of having a more refined body, whether or not you literally believe in a fusion of your soul with your former body. It's not the same body. It's a refined body. It's a body that is perfected. It doesn't have any infirmities. It doesn't take in food, and it doesn't have to go to the bathroom. Because heaven is supposed to be pure and pristine, and there's no bathrooms up there. And I think over the years, people have forgotten that this notion of the soul having to be housed in some sort of purified body. I'm only guessing here, but when Christianity started, it was believed that the second coming was right around the corner, and if you died before the second coming of Jesus, it's okay. Heaven will take care of you in the meantime, and then when Jesus comes, you'll be reunited with your body and for the final judgment. And I think because Christianity turned out to be a religion that would go on for a very long time, 2,000 years over. I think people forgot. A lot of people, your average, Christian or Catholic walking the street, I think sort of forgotten that part. They speak of soul, and the body doesn't matter. It's going to decay, or if you cremate it, it doesn't matter. So that's all I have to say. Until next time.